Rob Thompson, Alex Vergara on the Sports Biz podcast. I pronounced your last name right?
Vergara, yep, you got it right. Just like Sophia.
Oh, well, sister. You stallion. Listen, I appreciate taking the time to be on our show, this little show of ours, the Sports Biz podcast, brought to you globally, all around the world by LinkedIn. Alex, thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. Congratulations. You're over 150 or getting right to it. That's a big number. That's a big milestone. So that's you've been sticking with it.
I have about 4 years. Yeah, about 4 years. John D'Argenio, the athletic director at Siena, I think he was my first guest. Yeah. So, yeah, it's been fun to do. Now I have these fancy schmancy studios that I pretend that I'm actually broadcasting in. So
that's it. And you've really been trained really well. It looks like you're pushing all the buttons and everything.
So the backdrop lighting, but what you don't know is they cut the air conditioning off on me in here, so it's about 175 degrees. Well, thanks for joining us. I mean, this show is based upon interviewing influencers in the sports industry. That's exactly how I started it, Alex. I wanted to be able to allow people that I know, friends that I've had in this industry, and we've known each other for a while now, on just telling their story and sharing their experience and their journey in the industry, because we've all had crazy paths, right? And and I want you to tell your story, because you have a really interesting one, because you've been through the media side of it, through the college side, and spending the majority of your career with probably one of the greatest jobs in the sports industry, working for the ESPN / the Mouse House down at Walt Disney World. So, how did it all begin? How did you get into the industry?
Wow. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you. We're just, sitting at a coffee shop right now and just BS. So it's great. But it's always been like, everybody talks about passion, man. At the end of the day, that's what sustained all of us through the highs and lows and the no money at the beginning and the frustration of it. And the serendipitous side to the intro is when I was 15 years old, I actually was the sports trivia champion in Jacksonville, Florida. Yes. And all I remember was the answer to the question was Dan Pastorini. That's about as far as I can go.
Yeah, Dan Pastorini. Was he like the quarterback from the Houston Oilers?
Yeah, see, we're aging out of our audience here.
Yeah.
So the talent did a feature on me, and we had gone deep sea fishing over in Mayport. And so I got to know him, and then I said, man, I really like to do what you do. And actually, from there, he influenced me to get into broadcast journalism, and I worked in journalism in the local ABC affiliate. He got me a job there, and then I worked in college athletics with the folks at Florida, stayed in Gainesville doing some PR, and just kept grinding. And so I've had some great jobs, all through relationships. I mean, you keep talking about that. That's the one thing that I hope that the industry continues to rely on for the career track, because the track's going to be different in the future because of all this things that are happening around us, the AI and the VR and the technology and how the jobs are changing and the money side of things. But I hope that the relationship side of things stay the same for people that are just getting started. And I stress that quite a bit in my class. But I've had some great jobs. Through a relationship, I spent 10 years on the road with the SEC football as a statistician. I like to say I was analytics before analytics was cool. So I was one of those people that could memorize numbers and stats and stuff. So got to do that for about 10 years as a freelancer, and then wanted to really get into college athletics. So I took a job at the CBA in Denver for a couple of years and realized that Cubans aren't meant to scrape ice off a windshield. So I came back to Miami and worked for the Canes. And I was there for 3-4 years. And then I was speaking somewhere, and the recruiter, who I just ironically lives in my neighborhood, and I just saw him a couple of weeks ago, and we're getting together and talking about relationships. But he was at a meeting event recruiting people to start up this sports complex at Disney. I had never even heard about it. So it was about 1.5 years before they opened it. And got recruited through that. Whatever I said must have worked. And made 20 years of it. We started it from the ground up, and about 3 years ago, everything was changing so much. It was just a good time, good milestone anniversary. And since then, I started my own little shop, doing a lot of writing. Been an adjunct for 3 years in a great program with Dr. Lapchick and Dr. Harrison at UCF. And just, just continuing to learn and change and evolve, because, we still got a ways to go in our ride, and we've got to make sure that we're always learning and changing and evolving. And I think that's really, really important now. So a lot of fun, a lot of different things, met a lot of great people, coaches, athletes, been a lot of events, and it's all been great.
So
it's working.
It's working. You had one hell of a run, and what a great career journey. And those kids at UCF are really lucky to have you over there. But talk about that, because the one thing that you said, we'll go back to that relationships. You find, we had no other way of doing it other than showing up and meeting people and building those relationships and following up with phone calls and the little thank you notes and all that. And that's great. Things change, right? So
yeah,
adapted. Do you find that college students now have lost that little bit of skill set, or don't know that skill set yet, of just the common courtesy of you can't build a relationship sitting behind a cell phone and a computer? You find that that's part of what you're telling them?
Yeah, and I think it's really all the soft skills, and there's been a lot of things talking about that. They're different. It's a different generation. They communicate differently. They communicate and they are they want to transact in a way. They go, okay, I sent them a LinkedIn. I didn't hear from Rob. Well, Rob and Alex are a little busy right now. Yep. So what are you doing to, send Rob a book lead, right? That, hey, I read this book and I thought about you. And then when I need you in 6 months, it's already organically that relationship's happened. They don't know how to do that. And that's what we try to teach them at the program, because it's competitive. It's going to stay competitive. But I think the one thing that they have is, while our industry was growing and evolving and kind of going up that mountain, so to speak, and it was being built, this thing's going to get, I really think it's going to get blown up and change so much over the next 5, 7, 10 years that they're going to have to be flexible. They're going to have to be very comfortable in the uncomfortable. We used to read the media guides and you could see where every person was going, right? And we go, I want to do that in 15 years. And you didn't think that in 15 years that wouldn't even exist. Well, now we know that's the case. And so I think those are the big differences. But the tier one talent is tier one talent. They really are. They got the passion, they got the interest, they got the skills. They're reading the pubs just like we did growing up. The middle students are the same, and I'm generalizing here. It's not just UCF, but all universities. And then there's those other ones that want to be in sports because there's now the classroom setting. They want to be in sports. They think they do, but you and I both know they don't really have the oomph to get there and survive because it is so competitive. In our case, we didn't have the classroom, so we put it all into the experiences, right? Going to the games, covering the games, writing the stories. I worked as a high school cameraman for 2 football seasons where I'd show up with the camera and shoot the cheerleaders and shoot 1 touchdown and go on to the next game. And I love doing that stuff. And so, but that's where, I learned by doing literally from freshman year on. And so I graduated with 4 years experience. And unfortunately, some of these students aren't graduating with 4 years of robust experience, and then they're behind. And so I think we've got to do a better job. All educators have to do a better job on that aspect of it quite a bit, because, the job search, look at that. How much that's changed. So there's some smart kids out there. They know a lot more about a lot of things that we don't know anything about, right? And that's the future. But I think there's some other things that they're going to have to pick up on. But it's all maturity. They probably said the same thing about us when we were young pups, right?
Oh, exactly. The interesting thing, and I say this, and especially I think we're spoiled a little bit being in higher ed, is that we're right there in the front lines with this generation. I don't see that they're lazy, or everybody says they're lazy. I don't see that.
Yeah.
I think how they consume information and how they communicate is a little bit different than us. But those outspoken kids, those kids with high energy, those kids that are, they're no different than they were 20 years ago. The characters, the funny kids, the smart, it's all the same.
Yeah.
Their parents have definitely changed, and so maybe their expectations are different. And I think, before it was definitely, I don't want to say easier to get a job, but now that you get a job, you have to rely upon the internet, and it becomes depersonalized. So I don't think you know how to get to the gatekeeper as before. There was a great story. Michael Kelly, who's now over at USF right now, told a great story and how he just went down to spring break. He was like, "Oh, I love it down here." He went over to the Orange Bowl, offices, knocked on the door. Is like, "I want can I get an internship? Is it possible to?" He's like, "I sent out letters and phone calls and nothing until I showed up." And I don't think that has changed much since, Michael went down the Orange Bowl 30 years ago, and now where we are today. It's still, you got to show up. You still have to volunteer, and you still have to put your time in to get noticed.
Yep.
And, like the book, how do you land a dream job if dad doesn't own the team? It's a hard thing to do. Yeah,
I think, hooking into what you said, there's 2 points that I think are really important. And one is you got to show up. You got to go get it. Yeah. I see a lot of kids who are doing the job search, and they're sending out the resumes. And you see it on LinkedIn all the time. People saying, I sent out 1,137 letters, and I got, 12 responses and 3 interviews and 1 in person. And that's just the reality. All corporations just don't have time for it anymore. And, I tell the story. When I graduated, I wanted to go work in the NFL. Jacksonville didn't have a team. The Jaguars, some people would argue they still don't have a team.
Yeah.
Oh, those poor fans, man. They sign Foles, and second drive, he breaks a collarbone. They're dying right now. So anyhow, but so there was a GM at the New York Giants, George Young, who's in the Hall of Fame. And so I wrote a letter, and I remember it to this day because I've told the story. No ifs, ands, or buts. I want to work for an NFL team. That was my focus. And I wrote whatever the teams were at the time, 26 letters to all the teams. And, I got the colorful letterhead back that was probably done by the secretary. But I vividly remember George Young's letter, which was smaller, and it was typed out, and it really looked personal. I can't imagine that he did it. But he gave me great advice. He said, Alex, I really liked your background. I liked your passion. I can tell you. But let me tell you the reality. And he took the letter to educate me on the reality of what was then the NFL, which was, 20 front office people, a family-owned business with the Maras. We don't really change that much. Our PR guy's been here for 30 years. And so it's changed quite a bit. And then you don't get that anymore. And that was pure gold to me as a young kid getting started, to get that wisdom, to get that advice. They're not getting that back, so somebody's got to fill that hole, and I think that's where people like you and I have to come in and help them with that, because, we've all been there. And I always kid. Every time I see you, I go, Rob, paying it forward.
I love that. Thank you.
That's what we have to do. People have done it for us, and I'll help and talk to anybody that calls. I've got people that call me all the time, and kids are, either high school kids that would say they want to do what we did or whatever, and just talk to them and help them. And they did it for us. And I've got 2 teenagers now, so I'm even more empathetic to all that. So trying to get them on the right path. So
and with that, especially with kids looking at their careers, we look back at ours, and it's kind of like there's that like 7-8 year window where, we want to be so much further along, but the reality is it's going to take you 7 to 8 years of just figuring out things you don't want to do before you land on that thing that you really, geez, I'm kind of good at this. I kind of like it. It's fun, and it just takes a while to get there. And plus we didn't have the big, college debt that the kids have coming out now too. Yeah. We didn't have that pressure. So
you're absolutely right. I mean, to really get to a point where, like I took a gamble leaving Gainesville with a pretty good job in PR for a small sporting goods company, and took the CBA job because I wanted to be in a front office setting full time. And we had some great people there and some great leaders that have all gone on to some great positions. So we have a good young talent. And I didn't really hit my stride until I got to Miami, at the University of Miami. And that's where I learned sales and corporate sponsorships. Here I was an old sports information guy. Remember when they were called sports info people?
Yep.
I was strategic communications people, right? So that's where I learned sales. That's where I learned tickets. I didn't know anything about that stuff. That's where I learned Ticketmaster. And I don't think Arctic was around at the time. I got my first computer in my third job. You know, these kids are now 6 months old and they're better on their iPads than we are. So all those things are changing the brain. And I think those are all things that it's just really going to be the one thing, you know, Richard Luker, the one thing I think that overall the higher education space has to take more responsibility for is the factory of these kids that they're pumping out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 10,000 kids a year pumping out. There aren't 7 to 8 to 10,000 jobs. And if there are, top to bottom, I mean, some schools do. I mean, we have a boot camp that I do for them, which is 4 hours on, here's the industry, here's all the places you can go, here's where all the jobs are. Do some soft skills, some mock interviews, and we really had some good time with it. I brought Mark Gress in from Prodigy to do that with me, and he was the recruiter. So it was great. But universities have to take more responsibility for these kids that are coming out, right? And helping them not only get the soft skills, but get them placed. And, you know, especially in sports, because it's really, really tough. But it's if you want to do it and you want to hunker down and you want to get through it, it's a great career. And you just got to be comfortable that you're going to be working when everybody else is playing. That's pretty much it, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah. And then if you could get through the first 5, 6, 7 years of it, not making much, and, you know, setting up tents at 5 a.m. Although I found myself still setting up tents like 3 years ago. So I don't know.
Absolutely.
Right. That never ends. You're like, at some point, can I stop like getting up at 5 to set up a tent?
No, that's actually
That's the fun part, right?
That's the fun part. It's just when the rain comes down, you forgot your suit, right? That's when it goes, okay, I'm pulling rank right now. I'm going underneath the bleachers.
Oh, or you get those wind bursts and you get your inflatable starts tumbling through the parking lot, knocking out cars. And we had an event in Albuquerque, New Mexico for Hoop It Up, and we had 65 portable baskets up, and a sandstorm came out about 7 o'clock at night and knocked over every single 65 baskets, broken rims. Right?
Those failures or oops moments are the ones that you remember. When I was at Miami, there was an alum there who had just gotten hot and won a couple Emmy Awards or Grammys, John Cicada. And so we had a Hispanic agency that wanted to come aboard and sponsor. We were trying to sell tickets to the Rutgers game. And so we packaged a John Cicada post-game concert with the Rutgers tickets, and we got some money from the agency, and we did bilingual, and we got into a point of sale. And the university had not done anything like that. So it was great. We money-wise, we did great. But then the Canes at the time were really, really good, and I think we beat Rutgers like 77-3 or something in the old Orange Bowl. And Cicada's ready to come out after the concert. It's a big dome, and there's, I don't know, 1,200 people left, right? And it's raining, and he goes, I'm coming out here to sing to this, and he's singing the songs. And then we get a wind gust coming, and so it starts raining and everything stops. And we made a lot of money, but the AD was just chewing my butt out over, like, I can really control that people didn't stay.
Right.
You learn from those experiences, and they're good moments to look back on, for sure.
Oh, they are. But when you're going through them, there's nothing worse.
Painful.
Oh, painful. So what advice? What other advice do you give to your students right now about? I know I'm kind of bouncing. I want to bounce back to it a little bit.
Yeah.
But, what advice do you give to these career seekers coming out who, when you mentioned that you were a stats guy, you were, trivia guy, and stats is no different now than analytics, right? It's part of analytics now. So do you see kind of everything coming full circle again, and kind of the cycle coming around?
Well, I think it's just when it comes around, it's going to be totally different. I just heard Mark Cuban say something a couple of weeks ago. Mark's a pretty smart guy. And he said, you know what, analytics is great. That's the cool thing. Everybody's hiring it. But people need to understand that analytics is going to be automated, and the automation is going to, and it's going to always be automating itself. So to now say, it's just like sales was years ago. If you go into sales, you can get a job anywhere, right? And everybody still kind of says that, but in the old days of sports, that was the case. Now it's about analytics. And the reality is this big data stuff, which has gotten so big, you have so much that it's almost humanly impossible. And I think analytics is going to go through this kind of democratization, so to speak, not unlike creative design, where before, if you wanted to do a really cool deck, you'd get somebody in the office to do it for you. Now you've got these beautiful things that you can work on that make you look sharp. I think data is coming down that same path where you just press a couple buttons and the analytics will be there. And you're not going to need an army of 12. You're going to need 2 people doing that. So, but I think the big thing is going to be shifting towards the experience. You know, spending 20 years at Disney, you spent time there. It's all about the guest experience. And the reality is I think the fan in the stands numbers are going to continue to go down, especially in college athletics. That's a force of just what's happening in our society, and you can't really stop that. But what have you really done for those people who are there to have an experience that's so memorable? And again, you and I both grew up in that guest first perspective, and you know, exceed the expectations. I don't think college athletics is necessarily doing that. They're investing more in that, but I think until they do that, it's going to continue to drop because, I mean, the experience at home is just so great.
Yeah.
We had Miami and Florida last week. Was it last or 2 weeks ago in Camping World? And I had all my buddies from both sides of the programs come in, had tickets, come on out. I went to the party Friday night downtown for a little bit because my son was working as a bouncer, you know, or certain cooking hot dogs and stuff. So he got some experience there. And they said, come to the game. I said, I'm not going to the game. I was like, I don't want to go to the stadium, get mud on my shoes and traffic and the people and just the heat. And just I wanted to stay home and watch it, right? And so here I am, a longtime college sports person, and I'd rather watch it on the tube. So what's the fan doing? Now, I may have made a mistake somewhere down the road because right when I left, the college athletic track started going, woo. Yeah. I had a former mentor, Bill Carr, that was at Florida, and I saw him at NACTA, where you and I were having some breakfast last summer.
Yeah.
And I said, the college debt that these programs are just inheriting, it's crazy. I mean, there's some schools with $200 million of debt. I asked the Kansas guy how much debt his capital plan included for his facility. It was a big number. I don't know if they've got it all ready to go, but it was a lot of money. So you put $250 million of debt on a university's books to build stadiums and recruiting facilities. So all that's changed. He had a $6 million budget, and the most debt he ever had was $600,000. Okay, the head football coach probably makes $6 million now, right? So it's changed a lot. And you know, but sports is resilient more than probably any other market. So I think it'll continue to change. I think more and more people will eventually start paying for that streaming experience, the game that I want to see. You know.
Well, let's talk about the youth sports and youth travel, because that was kind of right where you were. You were at the epicenter for a very long time. How did your thought process evolve when you guys were there? What did just the business model? Was it built just to put more heads in beds at the very beginning, and did it stay like that, or was it, how can we diversify who our audience is? Maybe we're not getting the same audience that would go to the parks. What was the guest experience on our property at the Wide World of Sports Complex going to be different than, you know, was it a different consumer at first?
It It's actually it's a great question. I mean, you could do a whole 2 days on this whole thing. The reality of it is there were two things that were happening with Disney at the time in the mid-'90s. Is one, they had a pretty strong corporate initiative to diversify their portfolio of products. That's when they got into the cruise line. That's when they expanded vacation clubs. That's when they realized that the tweener market, especially the male tweener market, was not coming to Disney or the Magic Kingdom anymore. So they had to do some other things. And so coupled with that and the advent of sports tourism, we had the blessing really to build the premier sports destination in the world. And we don't have to pay for the land because Disney owns it. So we spent, I think, $120 million, $125 million to capitalize 200 acres of the facility. And so that was the first part, is diversification. The second part was it was going to be an incremental visitor to the Walt Disney World Resort. So we would do surveys and ask that family or that adult or that parent, were you coming to Walt Disney World outside of the tournament? If you weren't in the tournament, would you be coming? And, we were getting 75% of them say, no, I'm coming for the tournament. And because at that time Disney had gaps in their calendar, we would fill those gaps. We would strategically put programming in those windows. The holiday weekends were busy. Now every weekend's busy. But at that time, we would take certain weekends and, President's Day or MLK Day, weekend or Memorial Day weekend, and we'd fill it out with holiday tournaments and things like that and just fill it up. And we got to a point at the end where the parks are packed. We're turning people away. The lines are closing. And here we are selling youth tickets at discount. That started getting eliminated. So the profile of our programming changed. The profile of the athlete, of the kid playing on the field, did not change. They're still playing the games they love. They were still being treated like the stars of the day. They were our characters, we used to say. And even the pros would come out, and there'd just be this certain different atmosphere about it. You had events here. You were there. It just felt different. We probably had, with all the millions of athletes there, less fights per capita than anywhere else. I mean, who comes to the happiest place on earth and gets in a fight, right? You know the bad referee call, right? Right. So those two forces began to kind of work itself out, but we kept building facilities. We still had demand, and we added. I was just there 2 weeks ago and saw the third indoor building. It's a monstrosity. They double their basketball courts in there, so they're still doing the right things. It's just the profile's different. And the incrementality of the parks isn't there anymore. So now you got to drive more net operating income. And I hate to get too technical on the financials, but we got to drive net profit, which in tourism, that's a really hard model. If you look at all the other municipalities that are being built, that's another thing I think that's happening is a lot of these kids now are playing in, local radius type tournaments, and they're playing a bunch of places. And these cities are under the illusion that they're going to drive the economic impact that we drove because, hey, Disney did it, we can do it. And, they're getting teams that are driving 30 miles, right? Driving home or staying a day or whatever. It's totally different. And so when I did a study about a year after the complex opened, like 97, and there were about 17 to 20 venues that were online doing this kind of stuff. But it was just one sport, not like us, a multi-sport. I would venture to say now there's probably 300 municipalities that are building these things. New Orleans came to talk to us after Katrina to see what they could do. And a lot of cities were coming down and looking at, we want to do what you did. And, yeah, good luck, good try. We got this backyard over here with 40 square miles of entertainment, and we're keeping all that too. So it was different. It was a great experience. I mean, just like you said in your LinkedIn thing, it was it's just a blessing to work for a company like that and really live a real life PhD, with arguably one of the best brands, and we did that for many years, and then 10, 12 years after we opened, I was lucky enough to be selected to be the project manager and then bring this other little brand, ESPN, together and bring these two together and create something totally new. So I got to do it twice, and it was, great experiences, really just a lot of fun.
I think from top to bottom, I tell people all the time, they treated you, for the most part internally, except for human element, because not everybody gets along. But for the most part, top to bottom, it's just amazing people that work for that company, from human resources internally. What companies now still offer pension plans?
Yeah.
And just everything about, they just made your experience there really easy, for the most part. I mean, you minus some, people's personal agendas, but that's like that with every major corporation.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I've never worked around more dedicated, passionate, talented people.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. It's fun to come to work and be at a stage of your career where you're still really absorbing it all. You're 35, like you said, you're in that critical window of, how am I going to grow into the next thing? And you're around some really, really smart people who can just rattle off numbers in their head, and they remember the number you told them a month ago, and you go, how the hell can you remember that number?
Right.
I mean, you got 100 people telling you this, but they were smart, so you learned from that so much. And so, leadership is fantastic. There's names like Lee Cockrell and Al Weiss and all those names that are out there. Randy Garfield, all these people just had this ability to take Randy had this quote, which was the mosaic of talent that we had. And we had so many different people and so many initiatives happening, and so much, blessed with so much product and we had tight budgets. And in sports, we had the smallest budgets on property. But if we had a good idea and we could build the right performer, we could get it. So people think, oh, Disney had all this money. Well, that's the parks. The parks they just show up, right? With sports, we had to hustle it pretty hard. But so mosaic talent is really important. But even with great leadership, to your point, I always saw it as a blank canvas of learning, because I would also learn just as much from maybe leaders that weren't that good, right? Because they were coming in and out all the time. And, okay, I don't want to do what that person's doing, or whatever. And so I just kept pulling it all together and molding the clay, and ultimately becoming, what I did, which is a lifelong learning. And what you realize is, I don't know diddly. I got to keep learning. I got to keep staying fresh, and learn about what's continuing to happen. And that's where it goes back to the higher ed thing. I really enjoyed that, working with the kids and, frankly, just being that person to push them. You never know who's that person, that Glenn Fisher or the gentleman that helped you when you were struggling in your career. You said, Rob, all right, let's go. Let's get it together. And gives you that push. Yeah. That push changed your life, right? And so if you have the opportunity to do that, it's a very natural human thing to do. And that was fun. We had 700 interns come through, really, really best cream of the crop in the industry. And they pushed us because they all wanted to learn and they were smart. So we always were around a lot of really talented, smart people with great product and a company that believed. It sounds corny, it sounds cliche, but it believes in that guest magic experience every single day. To this day, it seems so simple. I work with clients a lot of times, and a couple of us work together, and we're ex-Disney people, and we're always telling them, at Disney we did. And people are looking at you like mesmerized, right? And they don't think that they can do it, but there are things they can do. It's really basic. Keep things simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Execute. Doesn't matter what size of company you are. You can do that, right? But they don't think they can. Mm-hmm. So, it's a great experience. Great experience.
And what do you so talk a little bit about what you're doing now.
Well, so I left 3 years ago, made my 20th anniversary, got my my Lion King trophy. Nice. somewhere in the house. And so immediately I took a little bit of time off and immediately started pulling some contracts. And boom, literally my first contract, you know how it works. Got a 9-month contract with Princess Cruise Lines. I go, oh man, this is easy. I need 4 or 5 of these, right? And so a former Disney person had gone there and was building the next Magic Band. So they were doing it for the cruise ships, and they had signed up as Accenture, and they needed some project managers. So they were based in Miami, And I worked for him for 9-10 months, literally building the Princess Cruise Line version of the Magic Band, the nice little iteration. So 2 ex-Disney guys had gone down there, and they brought all the same engineers and built it totally different. It was a great experience as well. I'm in this innovation lab with all these people that are just coming in for 4 days, grinding it for 15 hours, and then leaving on Friday at 5 o'clock, right? And boom. And got to go to Cozumel twice and get paid for it. I couldn't go to the casinos. They wouldn't let me go because I was technically working, so they wouldn't let me near the casino, which was, should have put that in my contract. But I learned so much about innovation and engineering and digital design and design thinking, and that really got me going down that path quite a bit. And I've been spending a lot of time studying that and bringing that into my practice. I've done stuff with the Dallas Marathon. So I did that for almost a year. It was great. I did a couple offering circulars for some facilities that were being sold on the West Coast. I said Dallas Marathon. I've done some work with our former colleague of mine, my former boss, Mike Millay, who has a fan engagement company, and we did some work with him on FIU and doing some stuff in the golf space, golf technology. So just staying busy and picking the stuff that you want to work on. You've been through it. You were getting started and you got to pay these people. So tell me, and all of a sudden you had 10 clients and you're going, tell me about that. When you went through that metamorphosis, oh man, why did I sign that guy up? But you need the money, you need the work, you need to pay the bills, and you're putting up with all the shenanigans. And then you realize that person, you don't want to work with that person anymore, right? So you have to be selective of that. But how did you deal with that?
Well, I didn't start a business from scratch. So it was a 30-year-old company that it was, we had our core business, and then we were able to create some verticals off of that. But it certainly was different when you're responsible for those paychecks and 60 full-time staff. So, it was a different responsibility. And, when you look at yourself and you look what kind of pressure you're put under yourself, whether you're working for Disney and you still feel like, there's so much pressure on me. And then when you work for yourself, the pressure's still there. And you realize, you take a step back and you're like, well, that pressure was from me. That was from me 10 years ago. And it's the same pressure I put on myself now. And so once I realized that, and I was like, all right, this is just, let me separate that pressure and let me deal with what I can, because I could work with whoever I want because we own the company. So if that one's not performing, we don't have to go through a whole HR process to manage them out. You're gone, right? Doesn't work out. Sorry for it. And good luck with you.
Yeah.
And if you have a client that you don't necessarily enjoy working with anymore because the amount of people you have working on that assigned to that client, and they're always the lowest paid, paying client to the one that gives you the most problems. Yep. You're in a position to get rid of them. You're in a position to say, end of contract, we're good, or I don't think this is a good fit anymore. You can't do that when you work for somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, the pressure's on you when, you're cash flowing it and you understand how the cash flow part of it works. So, that's how I looked at it. I guess because I was in sales for so long, I already had that natural instinct of every day I had to prepare. Everything I was doing right now at this moment was setting the tone for another 3 weeks from now. Was planting the seed. So running a business, understanding how that works was natural for me. I think if you've never been in that, especially in radio, that's a weekly. How much did you close? How much did you close? How much did you close?
Monday and Friday meetings, man.
Yeah. So I think once you understand that helps you as being an entrepreneur and running your own business. Yeah. Because nothing else matters unless you have cash. So. Yeah.
You've mentioned the theme of entrepreneurship a couple times, and the startup space is really interesting. And a couple learnings that I've had, and I'd love to see what you're thinking or what you're telling your clients. But unless it's a widget, you're not really an entrepreneur. You're, and like in my case, I'm a consultant, so I'm selling my insights, my time, my ideas, my experiences to hopefully make you better and give you some recommendations, things like that. But in most cases, the entrepreneur has to have that widget, so everything is an app now. And then I think there's like 10,000 apps a day, and everybody's just, oh, what's your app? I'm building an app.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there was one kid that I met at a Million Cups event, if you've ever heard of those.
Yeah.
And so I went to that, and the kid was thinking about doing home delivery of food and, healthy food, organic food. And, it's a good idea. It's going on for a while. And it was about the same time that within a week or two that Amazon had bought Whole Foods. And he goes, well, we're going to be better. Okay. Dude, cut yourself some slack and go find something else to do, But passion was driving them. But you got to really think about the things that are really needed now. And I think education needs more practical people that have been there. That I think education will continue to evolve to be more central to the experience, the ultimate experience that person is going to do when they leave. Not necessarily, okay, I'm going to give you this class in sport management and I'm going to throw you out there and you're on your own. I think we got to do a better job of that.
Yeah, I think, I guess to touch upon the last piece that you talked about, and maybe this kind of connects together, with entrepreneurs, what I have found, I'll give you a story. So I met a kid that reached out to me, Mr. Thompson. I am in a dilemma. I'm a high school senior, and my parents want me to go to Florida State. And they both are graduates. They're both alums. And I live in South Florida. And I have a pretty successful online business. And I don't really think I need to go to college. So I said, well, what's your business? He goes, I flip sneakers. And so he's taking, he's taking, these collectible sneakers and flipping them, finding them and just flipping them.
Right.
And he lived he was from a pretty affluent part of South Florida. And so all the kids he went to school with were all his clients and their friends and their cousins and so on and so on. Well, I said, well, how much are you doing in revenue? He said, about 30,000. I said, oh, that's pretty good for a year. He goes, no, a month. I was like, so he goes, yeah, my parents are both attorneys. And I said, so tell me the bad thing about going to Florida State. What don't you want to go? And he says, well, I don't really think I should. I don't want to waste my time. I said, how many students does Florida State have? Right? How many's on campus? 20,000, 30,000? I don't know. Somewhere around there, I would assume.
Yeah.
Those are all your new clients. Phone went dead. Silent. He went, you're right. I said, yeah. Think about all the new clients that you could have. You know how wealthy those kids are up there and blah, 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 blah. Within a week, I get an email from his dad. And I was like, oh, and his dad's an attorney. I was like, oh, boy, here we go. And his dad thanked me. He goes, Mr. Thompson.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it's like just sometimes kids need to hear it from somebody else. But we told them the same exact thing. Like, you could do this, but think about all the new clients, all the new kids you could get. But I guess my point is, I'm seeing more and more kids now have access and are following the Gary Vaynerchuks and some of the other folks that are in that entrepreneurial space.
Yes.
That are becoming celebrities. They're influencers.
Yeah.
They've made being an entrepreneur a little bit of a high profile, cool thing.
Yeah.
And the access that they have to build their own apps, to create a software, to sell on eBay, right, to flip sneakers, to create their own website, it's simple. It's free. One entry is easier. And the fact that there aren't pensions anymore, that it's an on-demand executive kind of lifestyle that people are living, it's a freelance lifestyle.
Yeah.
I think that next wave of students coming out may not necessarily want to take the traditional route in sports. They may want to say, what can I do to work within the industry? But maybe I can monetize it too if I could do flipping sneakers or whatever, branding or licensing or whatever it may be, or software for analytics. So that's one of the reasons, Alex, we're doing the sports. How's that segue?
That's good. I agree with you. I think the gig economy, so to speak, is here. It's not going away. Yeah. In the sports space, I mean, take a look at colleges. When I was at both Florida and Miami, there were very few things that were outsourced. 80% of the divisions in college athletics have been outsourced. But people aren't educated on those things. They aren't educated in the Learfield IMGs and the Aspire groups and that sell tickets, all these different specialty groups, the engagement group that does guest experience. There are jobs plentiful there that are meeting the demands of these athletic departments because they don't have the time, resources, or the bandwidth for people to be able to do all these things to that level. And so I think there's an opportunity there. I agree with you 100%. I've shared that a few times, that you just got to be looking for that little just hole in there. If you do a great job and you're servicing the Orlando Magic as a entertainer at halftime, and you do a good job and you graduate, and Alex Martins that sees you there and gets to know you, and all of a sudden, man, you're really good. I think you sell tickets, or I want to sell sponsorships. I got my own company. Boom, you're in. If you want to do that. So I think it's a different track than we took. I think it's the right direction. So I have a note. I want to read this to you.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to do a little Johnny Carson on you here. Okay.
I love it.
All right, Johnny Carson. Who's Johnny Carson, Alex? That's what you're reading.
Right. You're not
so this is a little card that I did for my cohorts at UCF. Just they had just met me for the first time, so this is what we did. And so I wrote this little. It's this card called The Search. I'm going to read this to you real quick. So this is about the job search that we were talking about earlier, because we have to help them. And what does the job search look like? So these kids, 6 months out, 9 months out, they go, oh crap, I got to get a job. So it's what I wrote to them, and I told them to put them in their little planners and read it every day. I don't know that anybody did it, but I thought it was very apropos. I gave one to Tony last week. So connecting the dots in the job search is vital. You agree with that?
Yes.
Finding a job is a full-time job. And each time you pitch yourself, know your next pitch is going to be better, right? They figure, well, I've gone to 100. Well, you got to go to 101, right? Your experiences, your network, and their referrals, your education, and your passion may help. But you own the job search. Many people come to you and say, Mr. Thompson, can you help me get a job? Can you call somebody for me and ask them for a job? Okay, that's not what it is. Research helps. Preparation helps. Learning from the past helps. Luck happens. Believe in the serendipity of the process. Be comfortable in the uncomfortable during this process. It's your process. That's okay. We've all been there. As a lifetime learner, you may be one step closer to your dream, your destination, and not even know it. So be courageous. Stare it down. You got this. Right?
Love it.
That's it.
Love it.
It's not sending out letters.
No.
That's not what it is.
I think you might have left one thing off, though.
Okay.
Trivia, 1970. Who played quarterback for the Houston Oilers?
that was my serendipity.
Alex, thank you so much, man, for joining. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it. Continued success. And it sounds like you got a very interesting president coming in from Kansas. That'll be interesting to watch how all that pans out.
Yeah, it is. It's a big time for us here. I'm glad I spent the time to hang in there to bring our university up to Division I, and he's definitely going to be the guy to help us.
Absolutely.
So I will see you down at Sports Biz Startup Weekend in January, my friend, and I'll talk to you very soon.
All right, very good. Enjoyed it.
All right, thanks, Alex.
All right, bye.
All right, you're listening to Rob Thompson, Sports Biz Podcast. That's Alex over there. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.